Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, the state legislature has returned for the annual budget battle, and guns are in the air as well. They're banging away at each other. Plus, the price of gasoline, will it continue to rise? That and more when Newsmakers returns.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program, and thanks for watching. Well, the legislature has returned. The annual budget battle begins, I should say. The governor of the state of Pennsylvania, Ed Rendell, has jumped into this big issue of gun control. He said some remarkable things last week. Joining me to help sort it out are two of our regular contributors, John Micek from the Allentown Call and Brad Bumsted from the Pittsburgh Tribune Review. Gentlemen, welcome. Well, Brad, let me start with you. I want to go to this gun question first. We'll get to the budget in a minute. I mean, some pretty exciting stuff going on. Last week in the legislature in Harrisburg, there was this rally or meeting with mayors, and they got into this big debate over gun control. Take it.
Well, what happened was that Governor Rendell appeared with mayors of small, medium, and large-sized cities to push various gun control measures that he's backed for a long time. There really wasn't anything new, except that he's saying, look, the legislature just has been unwilling to deal with these. They've been unwilling to pass these. What was incredible then is he went on to say that the legislature has ignored gun control because they've been under the control of the National Rifle Association. And that sparked a real firestorm in the legislature, where a number of legislators were just saying, look, you know, we vote the way we do because it's what we believe, because it's what our constituents want, and not because of the NRA. We don't get any money from the NRA. So, you know, why the governor would throw this bomb right at a time that he's trying to negotiate a budget is beyond me.
Well, John, look, everybody knows, I mean, you've covered Governor Rendell for a long time. You know how spontaneous he can get. He's relatively unscripted. I think you will. It may be a charitable way to put it. But the bigger point is that there's a lot of gun violence in the cities right now, and the mayors of these cities are under great pressure to do something about gun violence, and many of them believe that additional gun control measures are in order.
That's right. I mean, it's not even June, keep in mind, and there's already been 160 gun fatalities in Philadelphia alone. I mean, we were sitting in the room, you know, the other day, Brad, myself, and others. There was a palpable level of frustration, and that seemed to build. I mean, there was a lot of electricity in the air, and it was understandable that Rendell's remarks would come off that. But they are dealing with a genuine problem, and there is a real reluctance on the part of state lawmakers because of these deep philosophical gulfs separating them from the governor to take on gun control. They believe that the cities need to enforce their existing gun regulations.
Everybody understands that the NRA is a pretty powerful political force, but we also have in this state something like 800,000, give or take, licenses for hunting. We got a huge rural population. Brad, this is a big sportsman state. I think you would agree with that. Is it really, do you think in your, I mean, you've written about this stuff for a long time. Is it really the NRA, or is John's point that it's more about ideology and more about lifestyle and culture as much as anything?
It absolutely is. This is ingrained in the culture. People grow up learning to hunt. You know, particularly in western Pennsylvania, central, northern Pennsylvania. You know, families own several guns. You know, they're used to doing that. Kids start to shoot early on. It's part of their lifestyle. I think this is probably the easiest state to quote, lobby for the National Rifle Association, because so many people here agree with them anyway.
John, final question on this before we turn to a couple of other issues. As you all know, legislature's done very little with this since, I guess, the Casey years. Is that the last time they did gun control? And it had to do with assault weapons, correct?
Right.
The assault weapon bans. Legislature going to do anything about this? I mean, what are you hearing?
I'd be shocked if they did. It seems to be so far down the list of priorities that it's not even noticed. I mean, we're in the midst of budget season now, and that's really sucking up all the oxygen.
All right, talking about the budget, let's turn to that. The legislature, Brad, this past week, turned to the budget. They normally go through a process where they pass a budget. Initially, House and Senate, usually different versions that no one expects will be the final version. What is the process that you think will play out this year in the annual budget battle?
Well, everybody's talked from the very beginning about this being a very contentious budget and one that could go a very long time beyond the June 30th deadline. And I think that revenue pictures have improved somewhat so that the potential doomsday scenario of a budget by Christmas has been reduced somewhat.
Yeah.
But there are still huge problems that could push this well beyond the deadline. So what's going on now is just process. It's setting up negotiations. Right. Nothing's really been resolved. The House was dealing with a very preliminary budget this week, much like Rendell's budget, but how to fund it, where the money's going to come from is up in the air.
Right.
But I think the picture is a little bit better, but when you get the issues like funding transit, for instance, that's going to be one of the real bugaboos that could hold us up.
I want to get into a couple of those specifics, but before we go to break, John Micek, let me just ask you a basic question. Does it look like they're going to take up some of the governor's more ambitious parts of the agenda, like health care, energy,
what they've said is they're going to take up all of the stuff that doesn't involve raising taxes or fees.
All
the agenda items that don't involve raising taxes or fees. That could mean some components of the health care stuff on medical cost savings. It could mean some alternative energy stuff. But again, as Brad said, the big nut here is going to be mass transit and roads.
All right, when we come back, we're going to continue our discussion about the budget and find out where it's going to go with our two reporter friends after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society. Doctors and patients, preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back to Newsmakers with John Micek and Brad Bumsted, both reporters. We're talking about the return of the legislature to Harrisburg, the debate over guns, and the budget. John, I want to turn to you on this Turnpike business. The governor wants to lease a Turnpike. We've got this $1.7 billion a year for some time in the foreseeable future in debt, let's call it, or cost, I should say, to do repairs on roads and bridges and to deal with the problems with mass transit. What are you hearing about where that is likely to go?
This week, the governor's bean counters at Morgan Stanley put out a study that more or less reinforced the argument that leasing the Turnpike to a private entity is probably the best way to go to raise that kind of money. Mm-hmm. They're estimating the state can get between 12 and 18 billion, depending on the length of the lease, in upfront fees for a Turnpike lease, and then generate, depending on the way you invest the money, about $1.6 billion a year, which would meet almost all of that nut for mass transit and road construction. There still, though, there's still interest in looking at that, but there's so many questions about state controls, about backstopping toll increases, that it's just still massively complex.
Are you in talking with legislators? It seems that you tell me they seem interested but not sold. I mean, a lot of questions, as John points out. This is by no means a done deal in the legislature, is it?
Not even close. They're intrigued by the idea of $18 billion. How could you not be? Yeah. They like that. However, here's the big problem. What it is that Rendell can't move forward with this unless he gets legislation approved. And the kind of legislation he's talking about is broad in concept. It's not the particulars of a specific deal that would be negotiated with a company. But legislators, from their perspective, are like, why should we approve this without knowing exactly what it's going to be? Could come back to bite us later. So you've got this chicken or egg kind of thing going on between the legislature. I'm sure that'll be negotiated at some point.
And they might want oversight. I mean, go ahead.
They would, but the bill now specifically forecloses from that. It authorizes Rendell to go out and seek bids and to enter into a lease agreement. And once they sign off on that, they're spectators. I can't imagine a scenario where they'd want to be spectators.
But the legislature is getting involved in the merger of the blues, and they want some oversight over it, and the governor has threatened to veto that bill. So we could be looking at more of the legislature versus the governor situation when it comes to these big issues. Yes, no?
Yes. And I don't think Turnpike ultimately can go through without some type of legislative involvement. You know, from the governor's perspective, you don't want 253 members each out trying to make the particulars of a deal. You know, it would be a mess. It would be impossible. But somewhere in between, it's possible to do it. However, I'd have to say that there doesn't appear to be a great deal of support right now for doing the Turnpike. It could come up later.
In the remaining time, I want to talk about Act 1. You know, that was this tax switch that occurred at the school board level where only, I think, 4 or 5 of the 498 school districts that had it on the ballot actually approved it. It was very controversial. It's dead as a doornail. John Micek, let me ask you this question. Is there any real talk about raising the sales tax or the state income tax to fund education, to relieve, I should say, to eliminate a substantial portion of the school property tax?
Yes on the former, and absolutely no way on the latter. One of the things that the demise of inglorious demise of Act 1 has done is actually given a little bit more legs to the idea of raising the sales tax. On the other side, though, it sparked an acknowledgement on the part of lawmakers that the idea of some sort of tax shift is dead, whether it's to a personal income tax hike or an earned income tax hike. Voters clearly don't want to pay more of another kind of tax so that they can have another kind of tax reduced. I mean, what this might actually spark, and this is perhaps a naive hope, is some sort of actual honest attempt to reform school funding and to attack property taxes in a meaningful way.
You think? I mean, I guess I'm a little pessimistic, having been through 3 separate times, you know, Act 50, Act 72, Act 1.
Not to mention 1989.
Yeah, not to mention that, but I mean just in our lifetime, I'll put it that way. What do you, Brad, is John right? Does the legislature have the fortitude to say we're going to raise the sales tax, raise the personal income tax, to do property tax relief?
Well, clearly there are some legislators who want to do that. They really believe that the message from Act 1 was this didn't do enough, so we need to do more and give a bigger tax cut. But having watched this as long as you have, Terry, I'm convinced that the result of this vote is that people are resistant to change. They don't want to pay any more. They want tax cuts, but they don't want to pay more for it. That's the real message. And that where that leaves the policymakers, I'm not sure. But people, you know, it's, as they said in the 1989 debate, you know, people like the devil they knew versus the one they didn't. And that's the fear that's out there about, well, this
Plus,
be worse.
you've got this new legislature. We're just about out of time, John. We got this a lot of new legislators, many of whom ran on a no tax hike, no pay hike pledge, are a little skittish about voting for a tax hike at their level while the tax relief would actually come at the school board level. Is that a legitimate fear that you hear that some of them talk about?
I mean, that's one thing I hear again and again from lawmakers on this issue and on the budget as well. You've got 50 new legislators, none of whom want to go back next year and explain why they voted for a tax increase.
All right, great update. All right, when we return, the price of gasoline keeps going up. Will go up. We're going to talk about that and a couple of other subjects with Mike Love, who's the president of the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, after these messages.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association, Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money, and by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education, 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. Joining me now is Mike Love, who's the president of the Energy Association of Pennsylvania. I was kidding, Mike, whether it was the Pennsylvania Energy Association. We have all these organizations, and you never can quite tell whether the state comes first or last, but it's the Energy Association of Pennsylvania. All right, Michael, thanks for coming in and joining us. I want to talk we have a lot of things we want to talk about. Let's get right to them. Here we are. It's end of May, beginning of June. The price of gasoline has spiked up over $3 virtually everywhere in the state. What happened that caused this huge rise? Something like 85 cents a gallon or something within the past,
6 months.
6 months?
Actually 5 months. And it's actually gone up by close to 50%, and it's probably going to keep going up. And back when I was on the show a few months ago, I told you that it was going to go over 3, and I think it could even go over 4. Because we just haven't gotten ourselves weaned away from gasoline. And we have to start taking steps. And I don't care if you drive a lot or drive a little, whether you use a lot of energy or use a little. Conservation has to be much more of an ethic than it is today in America.
So is the focus just on conservation, which I think we all agree needs to be done, or do we need to expand, do we need to get away from petroleum and move to alternative energy sources? It's probably not one, or it's probably a whole bunch of things we need to do. Or do we need to expand our own capacity in this country, with offshore drilling and increasing the ability to produce gas?
Yes, we do. Offshore drilling should not be a bugaboo that it is today. It is necessary. It is, Cuba's doing it, and all of a sudden Cuba's found a tremendous amount of oil, and that we're going to be buying Cuban oil. How crazy is that? Yeah. And we've talked about, the madmen in Venezuela, the madmen in the Mideast. Right. We shouldn't be relying on them. We haven't built refineries in this country in a long time. Yes, alternative fuel will get us part of the way. Yes, conservation will get us part of the way.
So it's no single bullet. There's a multitude of approaches that we need to use. All of them have, in some form, a bit of merit.
They do, and we should not rule out any of them. And, unfortunately, it's very difficult to get politicians to address energy policy in an honest way.
Well, let's go to something that you deal with, I think, more closely every day, and that's the electric prices. The governor, as you know, has this plan which he says can save $10 billion over the next decade or so by rolling back electric prices. And is that feasible in your opinion?
No.
Why?
And I salute the governor he and Katie McGinty for trying to get an energy debate started. But I think, like all debates, it has to start out with a set of facts. And it's unfair to think that the Public Utilities Commission or the energy suppliers or the energy distributors can roll back prices by $10 billion over 10 years. The plan doesn't do that. It won't do it. And it's just not the right way to start a debate. The governor is exactly right when he says that there has to be more conservation and more energy efficiency. That has to be, as I've said many times, a part of the answer. But, like what's going on right now in farming and in contractors, the price of diesel fuel is going to go up much more than what we've been talking about with gasoline. Why? We're going to new environmental regulations, which will improve the air and will improve what we breathe, but it's going to cost more. And, in this state, we have put in, under this administration, new coal regulations, which are going to significantly increase the price of coal, and therefore the price of electricity, because we get 50% of our power from electricity. So you can't at one point say, I want to improve the environment, and then on the other hand say, but we're going to roll back prices. It's just not going to occur.
One of the things that he's talked about are these so-called smart meters in homes that I guess are aimed at regulating peak energy use. I guess that's correct me if I'm wrong about that.
You're right. You're right.
To regulate that. Should people be doing that, in your opinion?
In my opinion, I have joined PPL's program, and I am adjusting my usage as a consumer. But I'm going to say something. Some people can and some people cannot. One of the things that we fail to recognize is that Pennsylvania has marvelous things about it. But one of the things it has is an old housing stock. There's 1.5 million homes out there that were built before 1939. There were 66% of the homes that were built out there before 1979.
All right, we come back and continue this discussion with Mike Love from the Energy Association of Pennsylvania after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. and by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Builders Association, building today for a better tomorrow, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. We're talking with Mike Love from the Energy Association of Pennsylvania about the obvious point. Energy prices are going up, what this country ought to be doing about it, and what you can be doing about it. Mike, before we went to break, you were talking about these smart meters and the relationship between the smart meters and housing stock and the age of many of the homes in the state. Take it from there.
Well, the point I guess I was trying to make is, with the old housing stock that we have to take considerable steps to make homes more energy efficient. The people have to be able to save energy on their own. Smart meters won't do it for them. One of the things they can do, and probably the biggest step they can do, is to put in what's called a smart thermostat, which you can pick up at any hardware store, which basically rolls back the temperature while you're away from the home. In the wintertime, it drops the heat. In the summertime, it can drop the air conditioning. That's where energy is wasted. And smart thermostats don't cost much, and people can do that, and that can make a difference. But with an older housing type, smart meters aren't going to do the job. You have to give people tools and maybe subsidize those tools to help every person in the country.
And a lot of that has to do with insulation. I mean, a lot of homes just are not insulated well enough. Go ahead.
That's right. When you have 66% of the housing stock out there that has not been built at a time when we're concerned about energy, that were built way before even the first oil embargo, you have to focus on trying to make those homes more energy efficient and giving people the tools so they can actually save year after year after year. So I'm in agreement that conservation and energy efficiency is key, but you have to take into account what's out there in terms of what people's houses are.
We have about 20 seconds left in the program. Energy prices, you think, are not going to be very good this winter? They're going to continue to rise?
Before I came in here today, I looked at the natural gas prices on the open market that are up 21%. While we have rate caps for now in Pennsylvania for electric, those will go up at some point.
All right. Thanks for the update. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and stay well.